to lead off.
We have a question from Mr. Theodore Dubill. And he says, what tartan would you recommend for a 1700s, that is 18th century, style costume for someone of the nobility, as in something like a duke or an earl? So we're doing 18th century, presumably Highland or Scottish at the very least. And what would you wear?
First, may I adjust your necklace, pretty please? It's going to drive me nuts if I don't do this before.
It's going to keep...
It's going to keep doing that?
Yeah, it's going to keep doing that. Just show it off.
Okay, show it off once.
Off
there you go. Look how pretty it is.
Yep.
Then
my bear claw.
Yes. What was the question again?
How many bear claws does Eric own? What tartan would you recommend for a 1700s style costume for someone of the nobility?
Yes. So, 1700s. Keeping in mind that this, for the most part, predates clan tartans. There weren't a lot of, no register at that point, so there's no registered clan tartans. But there are some clan tartans, not many. The clan tartans really weren't a thing until the very, very late 1700s to mid 1800s is really the golden age of clan tartans and adopting clan tartans. So, Eric, what clan or what tartan or tartans would you select?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, fair disclosure, we talked about this a little bit earlier because it is something that's been on our minds lately because we've been very much in the 18th century recently with various projects. And what we've determined is really your best, in my opinion, not going with a well-known clan tartan because, as we just stated, most of those really came about in the 19th century. They were part of the Highland revival, the Scottish revival. There are one or two examples of clan tartans that predate that period, but not many. Mostly tartan was done for the beauty of it, the intrinsic enjoyment of it, et cetera, et cetera. So a nice richly colored tartan of any style could be serviceable. We do know that colors that were preferred in the 18th century were especially red. If you were of rank, red was very much a status symbol. Blues, and I think greens, basically. So any tartan that is in that range. If you want an example of somebody who had money and is of the period, then the best example we could think of that we wanted to show you was from the Grant clan. And that was
1714?
Yeah, the tartan is modernly known as Grant 1714. And it's made famous by these paintings. Cambot, bring it up on Still Store.
This is the Loch Heron reproduction of the Grant 1714 tartan that is on the screen right now. And it was extrapolated from the following paintings. Bam, right there.
Right, and basically what you're seeing here is Alistair Moore Grant, who was the Laird's champion, and William Cumming, who was the Laird's piper. And basically,
Peter MacDonald, in conjunction with Loch Heron, did research on these paintings and extrapolated the data, and essentially Loch Heron recreated the tartan from these paintings.
And these are significant because Laird Grant was the first member of the aristocracy to actually use tartan for livery. Livery, if you're not familiar, is the term for uniform for your staff. So basically, if you think of like, in the Victorian age, butlers' uniforms and things like coachmen and stuff, and having certain colors or maybe having a crest here, their uniform was called livery. That goes back to the Middle Ages. He was the first one to use tartan as livery. In other words, he bought a bunch and put all of his staff in it. Hence those two paintings. So that is the ideal example of what we're talking about here.
Sort of like estate tweeds today.
A bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Sort of like it.
Yeah, it's an ID factor and a vanity thing, frankly. So if you're going to do any kind of a recreation or impression of that time period of a noble, again, pick a tartan that's either really, really, really obscure clan tartan, so nobody's going to know what it is, but preferably go with a universal or a district tartan or something like that. Ideally in something more like what we now call an ancient color palette, so it's trying to mimic vegetable dyes. They did have brighter colors than most people give them credit for. However, you don't want something that's really in your face. Bright colors, probably just a little more softly.
It would have worn over time.
Like the green, yeah, but it wasn't as worn down then as it is now. But the tones were a bit softer. Avoid brown, avoid purple, and avoid, I think, like bright royal red as opposed to like a blood red. You know what I mean?
We're about to talk about one in a second that's a bright red.
Yeah, but I'm cooling over shades.
Yeah.
But the point is, they didn't necessarily combine those colors, especially not purple. Definitely don't do purple.
Yeah.
But reds were preferred by the aristocracy as part of their status. So that'd be my best advice.
Yeah. The other advice that we would give, and we're gonna let a little bit of a cat out of a bag here. We promised not to actually show the tartans, but we're gonna let a little bit of a cat out of a bag. The House of Edgar is, I don't know if you follow them on Facebook, but over the last 2 weeks or so, they've been kind of teasing this thing, hashtag Genesis of Tartans. They're coming out with a 6 tartan collection, so a smaller collection, mid-January, that they are calling a Genesis tartan, where they actually plucked the Glen Affric tartan, which is the OG, the oldest known Scottish,
So that one's
dyed
already
tartan.
out there.
That one's already out there, and 5 others. And then they're going to be weaving these as stock supported, but these are pre-clan tartans. These are tartans that date to the Jacobites. These are tartans that date to, like, the lost tartan is what, mid-18 or early 1800s. So it's not, it's not too late on the time scale. It just barely starts to overlap the clan tartan thing. But they're telling the story of the original tartans and kind of the lost story, the story of what happened before clan tartans and how tartan came to be clan tartans.
Mm-hmm.
So that collection, as I said, is dropping what's January 17th, I think, somewhere around there. And we're doing a really, really, really cool 3 content pieces around that same thing as well. What is your piece called that you've done?
Dun, 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 the Cloth of Rebellion. Basically, we interweaved, no pun intended, some of the tartans, which are from the House of Edgar collection, into where they were in the timeline of the story of the 45. Covering the entire 45 is something I would love to do, but that's like hours upon hours of doing it properly. So this is an overview. But how the tartans fit into the story of what happened to the Bonnie Prince.
Yeah, I really, really like your take on it of
Thank you.
Showing history of tartan, or showing the history of the 45 through cloth, through the symbolism and through the moments in time that the cloth kind of captures during that whole thing.
I think that's what they are doing with the collection, and it's something that really just appealed to me immediately because I'm one of these guys who, like, if I pick up an antique, I just have a visceral reaction to it sometimes. Especially if I know that it was in a certain theater of war, if it was it was in a certain area at a certain time when certain events took place. It's like this object saw this happen. I mean, and in this case, it's like these are the colors you saw if you were there. If you're walking down, the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, you could possibly see somebody wearing something exactly like this. So it's like it's a glimpse as to just a tiny peek of the colors of and the visuals of that world. So and I can really get off on that stuff. So
yeah, and it's neat to have. And I don't think I mentioned yet. House of Edgar is doing this with the help of Peter MacDonald as well. So all the tartans that they are doing is a culmination of years and years and years of his research as well. Right. We've already kind of let the cat out of the bag a few months ago. The Culloden tartan, the Culloden Coat tartan, is part of this collection.
Right.
That's that is kind of what got us backwardsly. We kind of backed into the project a little bit ourselves, or helping out with it. In the marketing way that we do, in the minor way that we do, telling the story. But the Culloden Coat is another great example. The Culloden tartan is another great example of a tartan that is of period that you could wear as a 1700s noble. It's a tartan that existed back then. So while you can do a current day fashion tartan like Spark or something like that, you can do plenty of universal tartans that exist today, but there's going to be in T-minus 2 weeks and counting 5 or 6 different new tartans that you will be able to incorporate into that kind of impression. And I would really, really like to see like the Moy Hall plaid or something like that in somebody's impression of somebody from the period. That would actually be pretty cool.
Yep. I think that's it's amazing.
Yeah.
I just love it. I love it. But
We are so excited about it. We're actually toying around with doing all the things that House of Edgar is doing with Peter McDonald, is they're trying to make these as historically accurate color-wise as possible. So we kind of took that and said, okay, how can we add to this story? What can we do with this information? How can we do something, different, tangential, and also cool? So what we did was we went to our tailor over in Glasgow and said, hey, we'd love to have a recreation, not just hey, make me an 1800s or 1700s jacket. I want a recreation as close as you can get of the Culloden Coat. So we have something that we're toying around with, trying to have a recreation of the Culloden Coat done in the Culloden Tartan to be able to offer that, or in tweed, or in all kinds of different fabrics as well. So there's a lot of really, really cool historical type, historical inspired, historically as accurate as possible stuff coming out in the next month, and has come out with Loch Erin stuff, in the Grant 1714 tartan as well.
Yep.
It's pretty cool seeing more historical stuff being, relit and reignited, almost as the counterbalance to more.
I was going to say, I
contemporary
think it absolutely is the counterbalance to contemporary tartans, and I think there's tartan for its own sake, for its beauty and modern meanings you can put into it, but then there's also that we're all romantics at heart, and we want to feel like we're connected to those roots. So this is such a direct way to do it.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
At the risk of sounding like a QVC presenter, it's this tartan really makes me feel like I'm at home. So anyway.
Yes. And make pillows out of it.
Jeez. It's my Culloden battlefield throw pillow.
With little targe buttons.
Oh, jeez. No.
Claymore tassels.
Oh, it's so wrong.
I know it is. That's fine.
Okay.
Now. All right. Very good. I hope that helps.
Hey, thank you for watching. Honestly, there's never been a better time to get into reenacting, doing historical impressions, or just adding some historical flair to your modern kilt wardrobe. If you're interested in the Cloth of Rebellion video, links right here. If you want to check out some of the tartans we mentioned, especially the Genesis of Tartan collection, the link is in the description below, and you'll find it all on our website.
And we have jackets. Jackets.